Good morning, Congresswoman Dean.
Good morning.
Good morning, Congresswoman Dean. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. Hi, Bill. Oh, look at all these great friends. Hi, Mary Gay. Hi, Christina. Hi, hi, Shirley. We're together again. Hello, Dan. Hello, Kristen.
Good morning.
Got a crowded room here.
Yeah.
Oh, 140? Wow.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Wonderful. Well, I think now that we're all gathered, I think we can get started if folks are feeling ready.
Great.
Dan, we'll kick it off.
Okay. So welcome everybody. My name is Dan O'Brien from Public Citizens for Children and Youth, PCCY. Welcome to this Congressional Candidates Forum that's being co-hosted today by the Bucks-Mont Collaborative, PCCY, and the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. Before we get started in today's program, go over a couple housekeeping rules and little tidbits so every attendee understands how this is going to kind of work. If you want, you do have two options. You can view as whoever's speaking on your Zoom, or you can do gallery view to see the entire panel at once. I think everybody's almost a Zoom pro at this point, so you might be aware of that. As you might be able to tell, you are, as an attendee, not visible and are also muted. However, we do want you to engage in this conversation. So we do encourage you to utilize the chat box or the Q&A fields if you have any questions that may come up. We did have registrants submit questions as you registered for the event. But if we do see something pop up, we may try to incorporate it in if possible. But we do also ask if the conversation and questions would be respectful to all. Just kind of clarification, each candidate from the 1st, 4th, and 5th congressional districts were invited to this forum. We do very much appreciate the candidates who were able to join us today for this important discussion. We know the days are ticking down to election day and the schedules are getting tight, so we really do appreciate your time today. Unfortunately, before this Wednesday, we did have confirmation from the Kathy Barnett campaign that she was going to be able to participate, but unfortunately, due to a scheduling issue, she is no longer able to join this forum. And due to that, one of our original co-hosts, the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition, who has committed to a practice of hosting forums with full participation from all parties, will now be joining us today as attendees and not necessarily as official co-host of this event. But we do welcome all coalition members who are watching and following along today. So now we want to keep moving on to our partners. We have three amazing partners who are going to introduce themselves, tell a little bit about their organization. And so I'd love to start off with the Bucks-Mont Collaborative and Kristen DeDominic.
Good morning, all. So my thanks to Dan for serving as our wonderful MC, and to all who have joined us today. Thank you very much. So as Dan said, my name is Kristen DeDominic, and I'm the coordinator for the Bucks-Mont Collaborative. So we are a nonprofit membership organization comprised of more than 80 nonprofit organizations, funders, colleges and universities, and community-minded businesses. So we foster information, we build dialogue, and we take action around critical community issues, with the goal of improving our communities and strengthening nonprofits. Our focus for this year will be anchored in social justice work, convening conversations and building community around equal rights, opportunity, and treatment, and how we can work towards the social good. So we invite you into this work. If you would like to learn more about the collaborative and how we can tackle these challenges and build opportunities to further social equity and community in Bucks and Montgomery counties, please reach out. I'd welcome the chance to connect. As one of the co-hosts for this forum, we are so appreciative to the candidates able to join and share their vision and ideas with us. Thank you. So our members in this community care deeply about the issues we are going to discuss and how nonprofits, and service organizations can be part of the work post-election to reinforce our safety net with sustainable funding, to strengthen and extend social services to all in need, recognizing the deluge that COVID-19 has created in our community, and to center equity in our discussions and action that create just and lasting change. So more than ever, we are seeking partnership and collaboration with our elected officials to fully support our communities and preserve and further the critical missions and work of all participating here today. So thank you so much. We're so grateful you're with us. We look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you.
I'm Shirley Howe with Public Citizens for Children and Youth, Southeastern Pennsylvania's leading child advocacy organization working to improve the lives of children. We fight for kids by working with our statewide partners, in addition to our local allies, on campaigns and initiatives to increase access to high quality early learning, promote strong public schools, including arts education, and improve health outcomes for children. This year, we celebrate our 40th anniversary. We're proud to be a member of the Bucks-Mont Collaborative and a co-sponsor of this event. We thank Congresswomen Madeline Dean, Mary Gay Scanlon, and candidate Christina Finello for joining us this morning. Our mantra during this voting season is kids can't vote, but you can. Please vote with their interests in mind. Thanks again.
Good morning. My name is Bill England, and I work for the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. And I too would like to thank participants this morning. Thank you for making time in very busy schedules to be with us. I believe it's critical that the people who are working in the community, nonprofit organizations have an opportunity to be informed as they make their decisions and vote in this critical year. The Pennsylvania Health Access Network is Pennsylvania's only statewide consumer-driven organization working to expand and protect access to high quality, equitable, affordable healthcare for all Pennsylvanians. Since 2007, FAN has brought together healthcare consumers and community organizations across the state to advocate for expanded access to healthcare in Pennsylvania. To achieve this, FAN blends coalition building and policy advocacy with our unique model of community health organizing that focuses on supporting and empowering consumers to get the treatment they need and become advocates for better health care in their local communities and statewide. Again, I thank our participants on behalf of my organization, and thank you.
All right, thanks, Bill, and to the rest of the partners, we appreciate it. So now on to our moderator for today. We have Sandra Shea from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Sandra is the managing editor of the opinion pages for the Inquirer. She oversees the entire editorial board along with the opinion pages, a role that she also held with the Philadelphia Daily News. As writer and editor, she has also covered the City Hall, tax policy, city planning, education, reproductive rights, and a range of other topics, including politics, obviously. Among many of her awards, she was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for a series she wrote on the Philadelphia park system. Also in 2013, she was awarded a Pulliam Fellowship to study poverty, which she developed as a one-year multimedia collaborative project. She also has an MFA from Bennington College, and as somebody who was an inspiring journalist in my past, she's somebody that many young journalists look up to as a leader in the industry. So Sandra, we appreciate you moderating our event today, our forum, and take it from here.
Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for that. You could have edited the bio I sent you, and could have had it boiled down to one or two sentences, but I am thrilled to be here. I really want to thank the co-hosts, participating organizations, the candidates, as well as the audience. I don't do a lot of these forums during election season because we're usually mired in our own endorsement process, which is what we're kind of just finishing up this week. But But events like this are always important, and they're especially important in dark times like this. These are dark times for conversation, for public conversation. But of course, you know, they're dark times for many of your constituents and communities. So I think a conversation like this, I'm very happy to be able to help shed some light on some of these important issues. So, so thank you for that. What we're going to do is I'm going to, once again, as you all can see, the three candidates that I'd like to acknowledge are candidate Christina Finello, running in the 1st District, Congresswoman Madeline Dean in the 4th District, and Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon in the 5th District. So just a little bit about process. We're going to begin the issues discussion. So each co-hosting organization is going to ask one question of the candidates, with the candidates having 2 minutes to respond. We're going to begin with Kathy Laws from Bucks-Mont Collaborative Advocacy Network, Chair, and I'll ask for responses to this first question in this order. So Congresswoman Madeline Dean, then Christina Finello, and then Mary Gay Scanlon. So, Kathy?
Thank you. In your first 90 days, please tell us what priorities, programs, and policies you would support to help advance racial equity, and how will you invite nonprofit engagement in this work?
Well, I thank you very much. Thank you to the sponsoring group. Thank you, Sandra, for moderating. Thank you to PA Health Access, Public Citizens for Children and Youth. I've had the chance to work with you for a very long time. And of course, Bucks-Mont Women's Advocacy Coalition. What my priorities will be in the first 90 days will continue to be the priorities I've stood for and values and issues that I have championed and care about for the last 10 years. First as a state representative for 6.5 years, and now in this 116th Congress. I look forward to the chance to get to the 117th Congress along with Mary Gay Scanlon and Christina Finello to work on issues that matter most to our families. This is a time of a pandemic. Number one, we have to get our arms around the public health of this country so that we will stop losing lives to a pandemic. With more than 212,000 people dead of COVID, we need to pay attention to the science, invest in resources, testing, tracing, and the rest. And I look forward to the day when we have therapies and vaccines. So I guess COVID would tell you that I care very desperately about healthcare, that we have universal healthcare. Number two, education. Look at our children struggling to get their education. I'm a former teacher, so I care desperately about how our children are educated, that they are educated well and safely. The economy and jobs and infrastructure. We passed HR 2, a robust infrastructure package. We need to invest in our communities. Other issues that I care very deeply about are our environment, the epidemics of gun violence, and the epidemic of opioid addiction. And I guess I'll end with the notion of the umbrella to it all is ethics and good government. We have to fight for ethics and good government. That's why I was very happy to be a part of the passage of HR 1, which is about good government, clean elections, transparency when we run for office, oh, I see my time is up. Again, thank you. Thanks for the time.
Christina?
Thank you very much. And I too share the Congresswoman's sentiments of thanking all the partner organizations today for bringing us all together. I thank the Bucks-Mont Collaborative, PCCY, and FAN, all excellent organizations that know how important it is that we work together to make sure that individuals in our community are able to thrive. You know, when I got this invitation to speak today, I was so thrilled. You know, my work before I began my run for Congress here in Pennsylvania's 1st District, I was working as the Deputy Director of Bucks County Housing and Human Services. And that was one of the best things I've ever done in my life, working with community organizations, working on issues that are so important, things that we deal with every day. And to work in the community in which I grew up, I lived and worked in Bucks County my entire life, to be able to work in the community that's given me so much and can hope to give back to the people that I serve is what really been one of the greatest honors, and working for Bucks County and doing that, and working with many many of you on the phone, on the Zoom today. We worked hand in hand to work on issues to make sure that people in our community thrive. And that is the same things that I will be bringing to Washington, D.C. when I hope to be elected as the first Congresswoman from District 1. You know, it's about making sure that what happens at the federal level has the impacts that we want it to down here on the local level. We know that everyone is struggling right now because of the pandemic. The pandemic has thrown us into such disarray, and it's been having us make hard choices. You know, I'm the mom of 2 small children, and we're homeschooling our children right now. You know, we've had to make choices that we shouldn't have had to make because of what's happened with this administration, them downplaying this pandemic. But when I get to Congress, I look forward to working with folks like Congresswoman Dean and Congresswoman Scanlon on working on such important issues around healthcare, making sure that persons have the healthcare that they need, that their healthcare is not going to be ripped away because of a pre-existing condition. And there are so many things that we need to work on, but I think what's important to keep in mind is we have to make sure we meet the needs of the community in any of the work that we do. Thank you.
Congresswoman Scanlon.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here with you. I mean, I've worked with PCCY since I was at the Education Law Center for a decade. FAN, I think I've had some peripheral involvement with. I live in Delaware County, so not so much with Bucks-Mont, but you're all working on the issues that are closest to my heart, which are children and families, and really what I like to think of as the fundamentals. I mean, and that's what I guess moving forward, to your question about the first 90 days, it is going to be a continuation of the work that I've been doing, you know, for my entire adult life, which is the fundamentals. It's voting. I mean, civics and voting. If we don't have robust election protection and fair elections, nothing else gets done. That's why it was so important that we passed HR 1. That's why we're all working so hard right now to make sure that every person's ballot counts and that everyone can vote safely. So one of the first priorities probably is going to be passing HR 1 again in the new Congress, and in particular towards racial equity, making sure that we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. What has happened to our country in the last decade with the incursions upon voting rights, with a disproportionate impact on communities of color, is just appalling. And we've even seen it here in Pennsylvania with first a strict voter ID law, then, you know, the crazy gerrymandering, which still impacts our state and local. Sorry, so much more. You're hitting the issues that I'm very passionate about. Personal security, whether from homelessness, hunger, violence, or health issues, and opportunity, education and economic opportunity. So with all of that, nonprofit engagement, that's who I've worked with over my whole career. So that's who I've been going to in Congress. The 3 of the bills that I've passed were developed entirely with support from our nonprofit community. Campaign finance bill that I passed, the disability benefits bill, and a bill addressing the abuse of children out at Glen Mills. So thank you.
Thank you,
Or I
Ken.
could keep talking and let you keep interrupting me, and you could say thank you, or I'm speaking. But
I'm sorry, Congresswoman Scanlon.
Sorry.
Yeah, we could do a little reenactment there.
No.
Thank you. So the next question is going to be posed by Dan O'Brien, Bucks County Coordinator of Public Citizens for Children and Youth. And I'll ask for responses in this order. So candidate Christina Finello first, then Congresswoman Scanlon, and then Congresswoman Dean.
Okay, thank you. So it's been 37 years since the Reagan administration's A Nation at Risk report sparked education reforms across the country. It's also been close to 25 years since President Clinton proposed massive new federal investments to make childcare more accessible and affordable for working families. Yet here we are in 2020 with 2 underfunded, insufficient systems that are failing both kids and our families. Do you support a substantial increase in Title I funding to adequately support our schools and a significant investment from the federal government to ensure there is enough funding for universal, affordable, high-quality childcare for working families? If you do, How do you plan to actually get this done in Congress?
Thank you for that question. You know, these are two issues that are very, very personal to me. I mean, with this pandemic, this industry, the childcare industry, they're essential workers. Childcare workers are essential workers, and this industry has been extremely hit hard by this pandemic. You know, I'm the mom of two daughters, and for a time before I was able to have some more family support, had to use the childcare system, and it's expensive. Childcare is expensive for a working mom, and I can't imagine for single moms out there. Women bear the burden a lot of the economic disparities in our lives, and that's childcare is a huge barrier for working women and women's mobility to be able to go through the workforce. So I think this is an incredibly important issue. Education, the same. Education is incredibly important. We have to make sure that our schools are adequately funded. We have to make sure that our teachers have the resources that we need, because the children need to have the resources that they need to have a high quality education. You know, there was a bill passed in the House that I thought was very critical to this issue, particularly around childcare. And the Child Care is Essential Act. I think that is something that should be looked at again, because any new stimulus package has to have more funding for childcare providers. You know, I also support measures like universal pre-K. I think that's incredibly important. Education is really the lifeline for so many children in our communities, particularly those in low-income communities. You know, if I didn't have an education, that so many like me did not have an education, we wouldn't have the opportunities that we have. So we have to make sure that everybody has access to a quality education right from the start, regardless of where they live. You know, and I think that it's very important to provide that lifeline to working families.
Congresswoman Scanlon?
Yes, thank you. Well, if it wasn't apparent before, and of course it was, the coronavirus pandemic has exposed the serious problem our country has without having affordable childcare and adequate public education. I mean, the pandemic has laid bare so many of our issues, but this one is the biggest one holding the country back. So just to peel off the public education thing, of course I support more Title I funding. I was a school board member for a decade. I worked at the Education Law Center for an overlapping decade. I mean, it's something I feel very strongly about. I also think we should fully fund the IDEA as was promised when it was passed over 40 years ago. That would be huge in Pennsylvania in terms of leveling the playing field across our school districts, because so much cost goes into enforcing that right to public education. But I am very grateful to PCCY for its reporting, its reports that it released last fall. Underwater is the report that focused on Delaware County and how families here, by and large, are underwater at the end of every month because of the cost of childcare, healthcare, and housing. And so I cite this report all the time in our hearings and when we're looking at what we need to do next. As Christine mentioned, we have passed some bills in Congress recently. I mean, the CARES Act and the HEROES Act added, the CARES Act actually got through and added money for childcare now. The HEROES Act would add another $7 billion to backstop what's going on right now and then add funding moving forward. The Child Care is Essential Act and the Child Care for Economic Recovery Act, both were led by Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who hopefully will be head of the Appropriations Committee in the next Congress. She is a passionate advocate for childcare, and Catherine Clark from Boston, who is in leadership, is also there. So we've got some good building blocks. I'd also support a refundable child care credit, child tax credit, which is going to also assist with all of these issues. So we have good allies. We've got we've been able to make headway in this Congress with respect to addressing childcare issues, but there's obviously a long way to go, but it's the only way we get out of the COVID recession. Thank you.
Congresswoman Dean.
Thank you, Sandra. I echo what the other gentlewomen have talked about. I too support much more robust funding for education, for Title I, for IDEA, so that we live up to the promise of our Constitution. I was a state representative for 6.5 years, and the Pennsylvania Constitution says every child in this Commonwealth has the right to a thorough and efficient education. What I found as a state representative in the minority, sitting on appropriations, was that in our budgets, we didn't always reflect that value. I found that we inadequately put resources toward education, and we inequitably put resources toward education. What I think we have to do is reimagine. If we invest more in education, I'm certain that is going to be the key to many of the other issues and ills that face our country. As Mary Gay pointed out, so many of these fault lines exposed grievously as a result of a pandemic. Education is among them. So I support universal pre-K quality, daycare and pre-K, more money for Head Start. The CARES Act did designate $750 million more to early childhood education. I introduced a bill which is called Restore America's Main Street, which would be direct liquidity to the smallest of businesses, not based in PPP, but direct liquidity. And many of those small businesses are daycares. So I think it's not only the constitutionally right thing to do, it is the morally right thing to do. I'm certain how we educate our children will not determine just their future, but our own. And I say that as a mom and as a grandmom. We have to rethink how we educate our kids and put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you, candidates. The next question is going to be posed by the Pennsylvania Health Access Network, and I'm going to ask for responses in this order. Congresswoman Scanlon, Congresswoman Dean, and candidate Finello.
Thank you. Healthcare in America is under attack again. We've had the best advance in healthcare came in the last administration. But it's healthcare, access to healthcare today is critical. There is a patchwork system that currently leaves 27 million people uninsured and tens of millions more underinsured, paying high copays, high prescription drugs, and other expenses. With the Affordable Care Act being challenged in the Supreme Court, and if it is found to be unconstitutional, what will you do to protect access to quality, affordable health insurance for everyone who needs it?
Well, as we've seen with the pandemic, all of the gaps in our healthcare are really being exposed. In my district, we've been particularly focused on the impact on our communities of color because they don't have access to the testing. They're more at the front lines. So it's exacerbating an already bad situation. You know, the Supreme Court case is the culmination of a decades long attack upon the Affordable Care Act now. It's been a death by 1,000 cuts strategy. If the Supreme Court were to move to invalidate the ACA, it's obviously devastating for tens of millions of Americans. But it's because it was the individual mandate was unfunded. That's the only wedge they have right now to force this declaration that it might be unconstitutional. So if that happens, I think the first thing we do is we move in Congress to reauthorize a new version to fund that mandate, to repair much of the damage that has been done, things like reinsurance pools and such that have driven up the cost because they've been eliminated over the last few years. So there's a repairing, and then how do we move forward? Because what the Affordable Care Act has done has forged a mandate, a thirst in America for universal health care. We still have a lot of arguments going on between people of goodwill about exactly how we get there, but we have a good basis to expand it. So if the Supreme Court does this, then we immediately do what happened last time Congress tried to eliminate the Affordable Care Act, and might I add, without a plan to replace it. We need to flood everyone's office, all the elected officials' offices, both sides of the aisle, with calls, with contact, because the American people want universal health care now. We just have to make sure that all of Congress knows that. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dean.
Well, I want to say something, and certainly I echo everything that Representative Scanlon just spoke about, but let's recognize this is not normal. We are in the midst of a global pandemic, and we have an administration that for the past 4 years has been in court to tear down the Affordable Care Act without a single proposal for replacement. If they think it's so lousy, why wouldn't they put their best minds to a better system? Healthcare should be universal. Healthcare should be considered an absolute right, and we have to make sure that everyone receives it equitably. We're not doing that in this country. And so what has the president decided? He wants to ram through a Supreme Court nominee so that someone will be seated at the table when the Affordable Care Act comes before the Supreme Court on November the 10th. Can you imagine the cruelty of making people unsure whether or not they will have healthcare, whether pre-existing conditions will be covered, whether their young adults will remain on their policy? How about those who have had COVID? They will now have a pre-existing condition. How about women? We can be considered a pre-existing condition under the old laws. I agree with Mary Gay Scanlon that what will happen if somehow this administration is successful in doing any harm to the Affordable Care Act will be that Congress will robustly and quickly come back with new legislation to protect America's families. We have to think of ways to make healthcare better. We have to think of ways to make healthcare for everyone. And one way to do that would be to expand a public option. That's something that I support. Some of the other things that we have passed in Congress is a way to reduce prescription drug pricing. But again, I just want to point out, this is not normal. We're in a pandemic with 200,000 plus people dead in this country and a president and an administration hoping to tear away your health coverage.
Candidate Finello.
Thank you. This is an issue that is particularly personal to me. You know, when I hear about the things that are happening, and you know, the Congresswoman kind of told you why we are where we are so eloquently. But let me just add that this is not normal times. You know, this pandemic has devastated us, but even more so than that, when you have an administration that their priority, and I mean, and this is how you know, disgusting this is, to take away healthcare. This was on their agenda from day one, was to take away healthcare from individuals. You know, and let me tell you about where we are with this, why we're here. You know, that the tax vote, the Trump tax bill, that not only gave benefits to the wealthiest and corporations, but also is the basis for that lawsuit that the Congresswoman spoke about in the Supreme Court. That if a congressperson voted for that tax bill, they voted with the intent to take away healthcare from millions of individuals with pre-existing conditions. My opponent was one of those individuals. He voted to take away healthcare, and that is where we are at. And I have experience with this. When I was pregnant with my daughter, they told me that my pregnancy might be considered a pre-existing condition, and they were going to take away my health care. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So when I hear folks telling me in the district, when I talk to them and they say how afraid they are because healthcare is under attack, I know exactly what they're thinking. I know exactly what they're going through because I've been there myself, that fear, that anxiety. We cannot, you know, if this happens in the Supreme Court, day one, and I hope to be in there in Congress working with these fine women on this Zoom call, because day one, the priority has to be making sure that we expand and protect those protections in the ACA. We have to make sure people have the healthcare that they need. You know, people like my daughter, who was also born with a pre-existing condition, people in the District 1, 300,000 people, they need their healthcare too.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of move to the next section of this forum, and that we're going to start asking questions that were submitted in advance by attendees that are here. So as before, candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. And I'm going to actually ask these questions on behalf of the attendees. So for the first question, I'll ask for responses for in this order: Congresswoman Dean, Candidate Finello, and Congresswoman Scanlon. So the question is, and it's a two-part question: With the US incarceration rate, the highest in the world, and with most of those incarcerated people returning to the general population, what will you do to support inmate services to help them heal from the psychological trauma and mental illness that is so prevalent? And upon release, to support successful reentry into society by removing the barriers to success, such as housing, job acquisition, transportation, and more, to build safer communities, healthier individuals and families, and reduce recidivism. And each one has an hour to answer this question. No, we're gonna, no, you probably need an hour though. This is a very rich and multidimensional question, but it's also a rich topic. So 2 minutes each for Congresswoman Dean first.
You read my mind, Sandra. How
I
do
know.
you tackle all of this? Criminal justice reform is something that I have been working on and cared deeply about since the time I was first trained as a lawyer, but certainly in the Pennsylvania House and now in Congress. I have the honor of serving alongside Mary Gay Scanlon on the Judiciary Committee. And this is one of the issues we've been working on. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is a robust piece of criminal justice reform as well as policing reform. But in terms of reentry and in terms of our incarceration rate, what I have had the pleasure, really an honor of introducing alongside Elijah Cummings, the late Elijah Cummings, was the Promoting Reentry Through Education in Prisons, the PrEP Act, which would ensure educational opportunities for inmates so they could successfully re-enter our communities after their sentence. So often incarcerated people, if they participate in education programs, if they participate in rehabilitation programs and connections to housing and education and training, the recidivism rate drops dramatically. One of my passions, as you may know, is tackling our opioid and addiction crisis. So many of the folks who are incarcerated have struggled with substance abuse disorder. We have to make sure they are connected to recovery so that they can be successful upon re-entry. That's something I'll continue to work on. Also, we have to decriminalize nonviolent small possession cases, which we know only disproportionately affects people of color, derailing them in their careers, derailing them from their connections to their family and raising their children. There's so much we can do, and I hope to get to start with the Elijah Cummings PrEP Act.
Thank you. Candidate Finello.
Thank you so much. And Sandra stole my joke, because that was going to be, how much time do we have today? This issue is what I've been working on most of my professional career. You know, my first job was at an extended internship at a federal correctional facility out in Springfield, Missouri, where I interviewed and performed psychological evaluations on incarcerated individuals in our federal system. And then I got the opportunity to return back home in Philadelphia, where there was a policy position created for me to be able to work on issues on bolstering our relationship between the behavioral health system and the criminal justice system in Philadelphia. You know, we were able to work on bolstering services to our drug court, to our veterans court. We have Philadelphia as one of the finest veterans courts in the nation, and is a real model that courts should look to see how we help our veterans who come back, who sometimes get involved with our criminal justice system. We were to bolster services to our mental health services in Philadelphia so people get the care that they need. And we continued that work when I was able to work up here in Bucks County. And I know I worked with probably many partners and folks that are on this call today, where we were working to make sure that we got continued funding to programs that we knew worked for individuals, that we knew got them the services that they need. You know, we also have to make sure though, and I love what the Congresswoman's saying, and I know the work that her and Congresswoman Scanlon has done, we have to make sure that we get continued funding for these types of programs, give formerly incarcerated persons job training, transportation, healthcare, and other tools they need to reintegrate into society and thrive. We also know we have to do more to prioritize mental health and substance abuse, particularly in our community. We have to treat substance abuse and mental health with the same level of care and resources that we treat physical health. That is incredibly important. We need to ensure insurance coverage is available for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment. You know, Congress has to hold insurance companies accountable for providing a full coverage for mental and physical health.
Thank you, Congresswoman Scanlon.
Thank you. Yes, as with the others, we could go on at length about this. But I mean, what is so clear is that our prison system has become the repository for people who are not being served elsewhere, that it's become the repository for people suffering from mental illness, from trauma, from abuse, from addiction. Far from defunding the criminal justice system, we have funded that at the expense of all these other social services, which could address these issues short of incarceration. So much of the work that I did as a pro bono attorney, a public interest attorney over decades had to do with this population, whether directly or indirectly. And there are wonderful examples of how we can address these things in our region. One of the model reentry courts in the country was started by two of our federal judges, Judge Restrepo and Judge Rice. So I represented folks in that reentry system and finding things like the fact that their licenses had been pulled in connection with criminal issues was preventing them from reentry, inability to get healthcare, inability to get housing. So all those issues are on the table. The school to prison pipeline as an education advocate, disrupting the school to prison pipeline, and then mass incarceration under the Obama administration. The groundwork was laid for what became the First Step Act, which Congresswoman Dean and I were able to vote on this term. There's so many avenues to go. Support for Pell Grants is part of the reauthorization of the Pell Grants that prisoners can access, is part of the reauthorization of the Higher Ed Act. The George Floyd bill, as was mentioned, to reduce incarceration. I had one success already this past term, which was great. We passed the Fair Opportunities for Seniors Act as part of the Older Americans Act reauthorization. Actually got it signed into law this term, which would allow access to benefits for seniors under that act. They'd previously been excluded if they were former inmates. So we were able to get that passed through and provide relief for seniors. Many of the people who are coming out of jail are seniors because they've been incarcerated for so long because of these harsh laws that were put into effect with mandatory sentences. So thank you.
Thank you. I think this is going to be the last question before we have 2-minute closing remarks from each candidate. So this question, again, from an attendee is, I'm going to ask in this order: Candidate Finello first, then Congresswoman Scanlon, and Congresswoman Dean. So the question is this: Pennsylvania is facing a $5 billion revenue shortfall, with states across the country also facing similar fiscal crises. So what priorities are you advancing to ensure that safety net programs and services remain available to address the needs of all residents? So again, Candidate Finello first.
Thank you very much. This is such an important question, and I appreciate the time allowed to be able to talk about it. For the last 10 years, I've worked to improve government systems for care delivery. First in Philadelphia County as their criminal justice policy coordinator, and then as the deputy director of Bucks County Division of Housing and Human Services. I've gone through that with budgets. I've had to make hard choices, but through all that, I've prided myself on working with our partners to have these crucial and hard conversations about how we make sure that we stretch every dollar to make sure that people have what they need to have the resources that are available to them. When the resources come down from the federal government through the state government and falling to the local government. It's very important to realize that a lot of times the locals have to make up that shortfall. There are sacrifices that have to be made, but we have to reorganize our priorities have to be reorganized, and we have to make sure that people have what they need. Right now, this coronavirus, as has been mentioned before, has shined a light on things that we already knew was happening, that families were struggling, that there are needs that they had. There's always been food insecurity, unfortunately. There has always been shortfalls in places and, not enough money to cover all the needs that we have. But now we see how prevalent this really is. And it's really important that one of my priorities going to Congress will be to make sure that the families that are struggling have immediate relief. My opponent voted against extending relief for hardworking families in the midst of this pandemic, voted against extending moratorium and foreclosure relief. And these are the things that people need at this moment. We have to make sure that the federal government steps up and allots additional money for state and local government. And when I'm in Congress, that will be my priority. Thank you.
Congresswoman Scanlon.
Thank you. This is our last, 8 months of our lives, is trying to make sure that we preserve the social safety net for everybody. And what's been so frustrating is that so much of the damage that has been done could have been avoided if our federal government, if the administration had taken the lead to make sure that the states and local government had the supplies they needed instead of pitting them against each other. If the Defense Production Act had been invoked, if there had been full-blown administrative support for getting this relief out there. Instead, they have said, states, localities, you're on your own, figure it out, not my problem. And that's caused enormous costs, plus the continuing damage, which is limited revenue. So that is why we've been fighting so hard for passage of the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act, which passed the House, the Senate refuses to negotiate on it meaningfully, had $1 trillion in state and local funding. I met with mayors throughout my district about a month ago, and they all said we need money to stay afloat because we're providing food and diapers and extra PPE and medical care to our residents because the federal government didn't do it. So it's so important. We're going to keep fighting for that. I anticipate that a new administration would take a much more robust and immediate approach to this, and I look forward to that. But in the meantime, we're going to keep funding it, or keep fighting for that funding, and it's funding for the local governments, it's funding for essential services. And as Matt knows, we were out yesterday fighting for one of those essential services that requires funding, the post office. We have a post office system that is being undermined by this administration, and it's impacting receipt of people's medication. It's impacting our election. These are not normal times, as my colleagues have said.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dean.
Well, thank you for the question. It is an essential question that Pennsylvania faces really a $5.5 billion budget deficit. As I talked with Chairman of Appropriations, Matt Bradford, my former colleague, and as I sat on appropriations at the Pennsylvania House for several sessions, when a state like Pennsylvania has a 5.5 budget hole through no fault of its own, through a global pandemic and an economic paralysis, the federal government must step up. And guess what? We have. And we had a partner in Fed Chairman Powell, but the recovery is incomplete. Through the CARES Act, we were able to take more than $1 billion worth of resources and get them to Pennsylvania. But that still leaves us with a $4.5 billion budget hole. As Mary Gay points out, in the HEROES Act, we sent nearly $1 trillion, or it was our ambition and our passage, which would have sent nearly $1 trillion in relief to state and local government. By Mitch McConnell saying it's okay for states to go bankrupt, it's an extraordinarily irresponsible statement, because what does that reality look like? It looks like our schools are not supported, our municipalities are not supported, our public health system is not supported, social services is not supported, our police departments are literally defunded. So if anybody wants to talk about those issues, it is this Republican majority in the Senate that is refusing to send relief to our state and local government. What I have been trying to do, both legislatively and on my constituent services side, is to connect folks to the relief that they need, to connect folks to their unemployment compensation, to their direct cash relief. The action from the Senate and the president during a time of a global pandemic, we know is irresponsible. Pennsylvania families are hurting. Pennsylvania parents are worried about the education of their children. So what we need to do is, number one, get our hands around this pandemic, which the president at the top has failed to do. And number two, boost our economy through federal support. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm amazed that we have kept to pretty much our time schedule. So thank you all for that. I'm going to now give the candidates a chance to share their closing remarks, but I'm also going to take advantage of the fact that I have the microphone now. And I'm going to co-opt this a little bit. And what I'm going to ask each candidate to do in your closing remarks is incorporate one element, and that is, why should we remain optimistic that Congress is going to be a solution to these very huge and looming problems that we're all facing here? Because I think, we've talked about problems all morning. You are all either members of and running for Congress. So can you weave that into your closing remarks? And I'm going to start with Congresswoman Dean.
I thank you, and I thank the forum for putting this together and giving us the opportunity to talk about things we care so much about. I am optimistic, so I'll end my closing remarks with a sense of optimism for the future. As dark as these days are now, I am very optimistic that this election cycle will bring forth robust voices by way of our votes to redirect the direction of this country, so that we, the people, will actually include all the people. Here's what gives me that optimism, and I remind myself of it every day. We have a new majority in Congress, in the 116th Congress, the most diverse Congress in our history, and it's a Democratic majority. Guess what happened with a Democratic majority with diversity of women and gender and ethnicity and religion and everything? What happened is we passed some amazing bills. They happened to sit dead in a cynical Republican-led Senate. But if we have a robust Congress and we reimagine and vote in some better members of the Senate, and we have a President Biden and a Vice President Kamala Harris, those good bills like H.R. 1, good government bills will move forward. H.R. 5, equality bills. H.R. 2, investment in infrastructure. H.R. 8, one that I care desperately about. For the first time in 20 years, February a year ago, our Congress, coming from our Judiciary Committee, passed 2 bills to reduce gun violence in this country. It was a remarkable moment. Mary Gay, remember, we went out arm in arm with John Lewis and others, recognizing that finally this Congress will do something about gun violence and the scourge that it is to our communities. Now, we knew that the Republican-led Senate won't do anything about it. In a new Congress, these bills will pass the House again, and they will pass the Senate, God willing, and a president will sign them, so that we'll be able to make sure that this 4th Congressional District has the protection of its government, that we will mind the rule of law, that we will take care of our precious Constitution for all. Thanks for the chance to be with you.
Candidate Finello.
Thank you very much. And again, I thank you, Sandra, and the other co-hosts of this event for allowing me some time to talk to folks about our campaign and what's important to our campaign. I too feel optimistic because here in Congressional District 1, the voters here have an opportunity to use their voice, to use their vote, to change their representation, to elect me to office, to go down to Washington, to have their best interest at heart. But not only to be an advocate for them, which they so desperately need, but to be a champion for those in our district who do not have voice, for those who are long forgotten sometimes, and for those who this pandemic has hit the worst. We are better when we help our most vulnerable citizens. We are better for it. And for myself, who has worked for many years in this industry, who has worked hand in hand with many of the partners and many of the people that are on this Zoom today, it has been the privilege of my life to be able to work in public service, to work in the community that has given me so much. And the people of Congressional District 1 have the opportunity to use their voice, to use their vote, to elect me, to put me into office as their representative, to make sure that they have somebody in myself that will go down to Washington, never forget where they came from, understand the struggles that they go through, and make sure that critical legislation is passed and it comes back here so that we have a place, a district where all families and individuals can thrive. It would be my honor and privilege to serve you, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to ask for your votes and hope that I can do right by you, just like I've tried to do right by the fellow members of my community for all these years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congresswoman Scanlon.
Well, thank you. And I do want to thank the forum for providing the opportunity to take a break from the overwhelming and endless news cycle, which seems to be about every 30 seconds at this point, and talk about the issues that matter and do so in an integrated and holistic way. You know, and especially for recognizing that these complex problems that we're facing and that we really need to tackle can't be solved instantly with a hashtag or a tweet, and that they do take work and they do take coalition building. You know, that I share Mad's optimism. The class that we came in with is amazing. So many people who were successful in a variety of ways with nonprofits, with small businesses, in public health, in public service, just bright and amazing and such diverse backgrounds, and providing us with the ability to do things like form the Black Maternal Health Caucus, first time in the history of this country to tackle one of the most pressing issues in our communities. So the good news is, over the last 2 years, at least in the House, we've laid a lot of groundwork and we have really strong allies. You know, the Senate's essentially been on break for 2 years, except for confirming every Federalist Society member with a pulse. But the House has held hundreds and hundreds of hearings. We've passed over 700 bills into law, most of them with bipartisan support. 150 of them have been signed into law. So most of those that didn't advance could have advanced under other presidencies, ones that aren't driven by polarization and pitting people against each other. You know, there are bills waiting to be passed through the Senate, waiting to be signed into law that can move if we don't have a president who's jamming up the works. And we've seen that time and again. When this president stays out of the way, legislation happens. So I am looking forward to seeing all these newly engaged folks in our political life get to the polls, vote, and start a new day. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, before we close, I've been asked to just give a reminder to this audience. I suspect this audience doesn't need this reminder that you need to register to vote by October 19th. You need to sign up to vote by mail by October 27th and get ready for the general election on November 3rd. I want to thank the co-hosts, the candidates, as well as the audience for showing up and having this important conversation that needs to continue. And we hope it does in very positive direction. So I will bid you all good day. And if one of the co-hosts wants to add a cherry on top of that, please do. Thank you. Kristen, you're muted.
I am muted. I'm trying to pop back in. Can you?
Yep, you're fine now.
Okay, I think I've somehow hidden myself. I'll just say thank you so much to all for participating. It was such an honor to hear your positions this morning, to have such engaged dialogue. And we're grateful to all of the participants and our attendees for taking time this morning to really pause and reflect on, as has been said, intricate issues, challenging issues, and to leave us with your optimism and your hope for what is to come here in November and beyond. So thank you very much. And thank you to all for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Happy weekend to all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so you can